Just a moment ago, Dick LaPalme over here mentioned Diane Carroll. Having watched her grow from the High School of Performing Arts in New York and develop, first she was going to be a school teacher, as I understand her viewpoint. She was going to be a sociologist, and then all of a sudden, Paul Whiteman's ABC program produced a real opportunity for her. And she is a marvelous young person. Just for the sake of reference, would you care to comment on Diane and her talent?
Well, I think Diane is one of the forthcoming stars, I think, for the cafe. For cafes, she's got a lot of wonderful writing behind her, and then she's been staged very successfully. And I think it's only a matter of time with the right handling that this girl will be a big star.
Well, in reference to Diane Carroll, she's quite the opposite of a lot of artists who've developed in the last 5-10 years in this era of rock and roll, and yet...
Those are artists?
Well, I think of Joe Turner, Ruth Brown, and then I think of the blues and real folk music.
But that's not rock and roll, though. Joe Turner, Ruth Brown.
I should say not. We ought to clarify that.
Ray Charles and all of those. That's the real blues. Those things that have been around for years.
I think it'd be great if you draw a line and define a little bit of the difference.
Well, I think the blues, like you take, for instance, Ray Charles, whom is my favorite. I think he's about the greatest thing that ever opened his mouth as far as singing the blues. Ray Charles, I think, is a perfect example. Now, he satisfies the blues-going audience. He satisfies the sort of the gospel-type singer. And also, he satisfies the rock and rollers who think he's singing rock and roll. But Ray does anything but that. He's probably the greatest exponent of music that you'll find around in that particular field. I first met Ray Charles when I had a band, and we were playing up in Seattle, and he was playing progressive jazz. And I didn't even know he sang. And he was playing piano and saxophone, had a little group with Quincy Jones, and all of them were in the group, swinging little jazz band. But Ray Charles is a great artist. I mean, I have all his records, and as fast as they come out, I have them. I'm on standing order with his. As a matter of fact, my wife puts a stack of records on when she cleans up the house, and they're Ray Charles records. She can work better.
I'm sure of that. He has that very fine spirit.
No, he's marvelous.
Well, just
Joe Turner, those guys, man, those are the real blues singers. I mean, they're not like these flash in the pans, these wigglers and these terrible sounding people, that sing all out of tune and rely on visual support to send them over. Some of these guys like, any of this rock and roll garbage that's around today. I think it's more or less selling shake dancing instead of singing. I hate to even consider the guys like I just mentioned, Joe Turner and Ruth Brown and people like that along with rock and roll, because it's too cheap to mention great artists like them along with it.
Certainly bears out a thought that I have, and I might ask you a leading question and ask you, do you think that popular music in America during the last 8 years, has been set back?
Oh, there's been a stalemate. There's been a definite stalemate in music for the simple reason that they've relied on the most primitive and the most unartful form of music, and they've grasped it and made it so popular. Gee, man, I remember the time when we were starting out. If a guy sang that far out of tune or sang out of meter or anything like it, he'd never get a job. It was impossible to even get a job. But now, I mean, if it's very bad, it's going to sell records. And if it's very good, it won't.
Do you think the music business has any sort of responsibility it owes anybody?
I think it owes the kids. I think they owe the kids a very, very big responsibility, because what they've done, they've gone and taken this rock and roll trend. They've filled the kids' heads to the point that Well, they have no nostalgic thing. Geez, imagine what a kid's going to have
I can hear the
15 years from now.
memories.
Yeah, splish splash, I was taking a bath, or some garbage like this, you know. I mean, what a great nostalgic thing to have. Darling, do you remember that? We were dancing. You remember the guy stuck a knife in the guy next to us, you know? All of these kind of bits, you know?
I had the switchblade.
Yeah, you know, and all of these kind of things. There's nothing for them to even, and I think it's nothing but strictly, I think you can fault, and I mean this wholeheartedly, you can fault a lot of these top 40 disc jockeys for this. They've ruined the ear of the kids. The kids don't even know. They tell you now, when you make a record, they'll say, well, yeah, B, that's a good song, but the kids are buying this. The kids will buy anything if they're indoctrinated that way. We were kids once. We bought good music because that's all you heard. See, at least when we came up, you had a choice. If you liked jazz, well, you had, or during the swing era, you had the great bands, the Goodman bands, the Miller Band, Count Basie, Jimmy Lunceford, Duke Ellington. You had that. If you didn't like jazz, then you had Sammy Kaye, you had Guy Lombardo, you had Wayne King. You had a choice at least. This way, you got fast rock and roll, slow rock and roll. Nothing in between. You don't give them anything to listen.
With a few extra added hiccups.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's sickening. It's a terrible thing, boy. And everything, every song that they write has got the same identical chord progressions. Every one of them goes into the same type of a channel, the same thing. The guy hiccups going into the channel, and it's pretty terrible. How many of these records have you heard where they cut them off while they're at the end? The guy don't even know when he finishes. Then all of a sudden, bam, the guy will just cut it. That's the end of it. The poor guy's still singing. They don't know when they're finished.
Known as contemporary editing.
Oh, yeah, contemporary editing is right.
Close to censorship.
And it's not the kids' fault. It's not their fault. It's not their fault at all. I know this for a fact. I'd take my kids for an example. They've been around good music all of their lives because all of my friends have always been around my house, and I've always had good jazz records, things of that nature. Good, not only jazz, good ballads, good singers, and good instrumentalists. So Basie was rehearsing at the Crescendo in Los Angeles. So I took my three older boys, one Kenny's 16, Ron is 14 and a half, and Billy's 13. And I took them up to the rehearsal. And that's when Basie was rehearsing that last album. He was rehearsing some of the tunes that we was going to record in that Chairman of the Board album. And they rehearsed them, and it was just some marvelous things. So we were riding home after, and I asked the guy, I said, well, how'd you like it, fella? He said, well, Dad, that's more in your groove, you know? Why? Because they haven't heard anything like that, you know?
Well, it sounds to me like you put the blame, of course, on the broadcasters, and I'm sure there's responsibility there. Of course, not all disc jockeys are involved. I think some management, too.
Of course.
And then, isn't the music business kind of a, wouldn't you define it as a trend kind of business?
It is, definitely. It follows a fad. It always has followed a fad. But by the same token, Lane, it's followed a fad, and you've always had 2 or 3 fads. I mean, God, look, Lombardo's gone for ages, strictly because there's always been people when the fad of rock and roll, swing was in, they still dug Lombardo. He was still one of the biggest money makers in the country, over Goodman or anybody, you know.
And it was well-rehearsed music, and always in tune.
Though I never dug it, because it was a little simple for a musician to understand, but yet we as jazz musicians used to put him down. But by the same token, people liked it. At least they had a choice.
But I think kind of a spirit of fun, the satire concerning it.
Oh, sure. But I think this top 40 garbage is about the most terrible thing that they can do to people. Now, I've gone to radio stations where they get these things from the program managers with top 40 on it. And I've even seen it in some stations where they have underlined, you will not deviate from these selections. What is a disc jockey? All he needs to do is be a guy who can be able to read and talk.
Well, actually, these fellows are given lobotomies, you see.
Yeah.
And they're slowed down to the point where they probably can't react anymore. It's somewhat like brainwashing in a sense.
Oh, my God, it really is. You know what? Yeah, I say this for an example. Now, you take, for instance, a guy, just to drop a name, like a Dick Clark, for instance. He could change this thing inside of 6 months.
I was going to suggest, I suggested something to Dick LaPalme over here. And this is what I suggested. I said, Dick, how do you think the reaction would be if Mr. B were booked on Dick Clark's bandstand on the next show? And what was your reply, Dick?
As I think the kids would flip. They would have to. They would have to flip if he were presented.
Providing Dick.
Why?
Providing Dick Clark would say, "Here's my favorite singer." The kids would eat it up. That's how much power this guy has got. And by the same token, he could take Nat, play Nat's records, play Sinatra's, play little Stevie Lawrence, some guys who are trying to sing, and it would go. You know, it would go. No, it would have to go, you know. But no, he'll play these, the flamingos, the sparrows, the buzzards, every other kind of bird that fly. I'm looking for the next bird group to come out.
When I said at the table, Leigh, I said if Dick Clark put Billy Eckstine on, I said it, I think, exactly like this. I said he would out-Avalon Frankie because he is, a man who's been in the business for years, a fantastic performer who can run rings around anyone I can think of at the moment, performance, you know, and sings like no one I've ever heard. And I think that if the kids hear this stuff, if they hear it, and as I say, as he just put it, if he is presented properly, they've got to flip. They've got to, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
It's my contention all along that he can change this thing in 6 months' time.
Yes, but will he?
He won't. He won't.
He's liable.
He won't.
What with congressional investigations to be frank and direct
He won't
and
change
to the
that.
point?
No.
Well, the pressure might be such in the next era, in the next 10 years, that you'll find a complete new tenor of things. And just to speak a little more optimistically about what things might lie ahead of us, B, do you think that there's a hope for, first of all, the future of a good author, future of a good artist, future for good conductors and arrangers, personalities such as yourself?
I think so.
Where's your place in show business?
Well, I think
broadcasting?
so. We as performers who have come up in the 40s and things of that nature, or the 30s, and the end of the 30s and the 40s. Thank God we came up in a band era where the bands were doing one-nighters and things. We got a world of experience that the kids nowadays can never get. Kid makes a hit record, they shove him right out on the stage. He don't know how to get off. He don't even know what to do after he's out there. He sings his record. 3 weeks after that, there's another record, #1. You can't find this kid that made this one 3 weeks before. You don't know where he is. There's no career anymore. There's no planning. A poor guy now that's managing an artist. I know this for a fact. I used to take jazz shows out on the road. You know that. We went through the South. So I figured I'd augment it when I took the Clovers, Ruth Brown, Basie's band, and myself. We went down through there. Sensational. The Clovers had a hit rock and roll record going at the time. Something, I don't know what it was now offhand. And the next, I had to buy them for 2 years. The next year I took them down there, they didn't have a hit record. It was just like walking them out on the stage and shooting them. Nobody cared less. Even when they did their song that they made the hit off the year before, nothing. You know, there's no letdown, you know.
There's no middle road.
No.
When you took Jimmy Lunsford out on the road, or Mr. B's band, or you took Duke Ellington out on the road, the material and the showmanship stood at a certain level, didn't it?
Sure, well, you take, for instance, now, you go to see Nat Cole. You go to see Nat. When he starts to sing Unforgettable Wham, the people applaud. Or Mona Lisa, any of those songs, they're established. The same thing right here. If I start into singing, I Apologize, the song is 8 years old. They applaud for it. They know it. Let some of these rock and roll groups walk out there, sing a song they made 6 months ago. Nobody knows it. They've forgotten about it. There's somebody else, because simply the song itself is crap. It doesn't have a retaining quality that makes you always remember that song. There's no nostalgia to those things anymore. And I think it's a morbid thing to do to these kids, because a lot of these kids have a lot of talent. I know this little kid, Frankie Lyman, now. Kid's got a world of talent. Can't get started. can't get started. Why? And he's got more talent than Frankie Avalon or any of those kids put together. But he can't get now he's decided through handling now. Bobby Redcross, who used to be with me, is handling him now, and he's trying to move him into cafes. And he's a great little performer. But it's a morbid thing, you know.
It certainly is a morbid thing.
It's a terrible thing to do to kids
no real
nowadays.
stake or tradition.
No, sir. It used to be, you know yourself. There's guys around have been for years and years and years, and they're right on. People come to see them strictly through a nostalgic thing. Look at Sophie Tucker. Nobody comes to hear Sophie Tucker sing. They come to see Sophie Tucker do her old